are residential. Because if you look around the southeast cities, you look around Maywood, Bell, and Huntington Park, most of the city is housing. And so if you're looking for land in this area, and really throughout LA, what you're going to wind up displacing inevitably is some houses. So I understand people saying take no houses. We cannot build this school, I don't believe, without displacing some houses. And that is just the reality of the matter. So it really comes down to what houses? Where should we build the school? And there is pain associated with that. And we ought to make sure we build it in the right place so that it provides the greatest gain for the community long term. We also really believe that based on these numbers, based on where the students are who are going to Bell High School from a community, that Maywood is probably the place to build this school. Because this school, which is, we're saying it's 1,200 seats, there's 1,140 students now at Bell High School for Maywood. This will be a high school for Maywood. And just as every jurisdiction has had to recognize that as a municipality it has to provide land for essential services, it makes sense that this school should be built in Maywood. We put that out for your consideration. So now, almost done. Ian talked about the sites, and without knowing a lot, let's talk about exactly the sites that we're talking about. This shows the KV lines. This is one of the things that influences where we can place the schools. And we look around here, Ian talked about needing a 100-foot setback. We can reduce that setback to 25 feet if we underground lines. So it'd be very hard to build a school between these two lines because you have 25 feet from one side and 25 feet from the other. It doesn't leave you much sight. So we do have these sites, 41 and 46, that are adjacent to those lines. We anticipate that if we went to either one of those sites, we were underground the line so as to minimize the setback from those power lines. But it does kind of, if you say you build it in Maywood and stay away from those power lines, or don't be in the middle of the power lines, and you begin to zero in on where we can put the school. And what we're talking about is zeroing in on where we can build this school. Site 18 that we've talked about since November, or October even, next slide please, is coming right up. Site 18 is bounded by Mayflower and King. On the north side of Slauson, running up to 57th Street, we would vacate 58th Street that bisects that site. This site, the current uses are 10 single-family houses, 96 multifamily. You can see, given the number of parcels, that they're primarily duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. There are 6 businesses on that site, and so you have about 112. We're looking for about 9.5 acres for this school, and this site meets that. So that's site 18. It's Slauson between Mayflower and King. It's in the eastern side of Maywood. Next slide. Site 41, we're talking about this for the first time tonight. This is a little further west on Slauson. It's Slauson on the south, bounded by Gifford and Corona with 57th at the north. Again, we would vacate 58th Street in between. This is a little smaller. It's about 8.9 acres. There we have 21 single-family houses as opposed to 10 on the other site. We have 109 apartments as opposed to 96 on the other site. We have 16 businesses. In total, a larger region. I'm on? Okay, so a larger relocation. Next site is 46, which is a little further north. It's off of Slauson, and it is purely residential. It's 37 single families, so we went from 10 to 21 to 37. It's 83 apartments. We went from 96 to 109 to 983. There's no businesses. It's the smallest of the 3 sites. It's 8.65 acres. The other thing I want to bring up is when we met with elected officials and community folks a couple weeks ago. We talked about the Thermidor site, and this was a site that was suggested before we picked the last site. And the big issue with the Thermidor site that precluded us from going there was the presence of a gas separation facility that stores hydrogen. Hydrogen is terrifically volatile, and as Ian said, if it blows up, does it exceed the risk threshold? And this one clearly did. So we excluded going there. In our meeting with the stakeholders a couple weeks ago, it came up again, and folks said, well, couldn't you reconfigure, since this site was like, I think, 12 or 13 acres, if you excluded that part that is within the gas, the risk zone of the gas separation facility, could it work? And so this just came up like 10 days ago. We did not have time to give notice to the occupants of that site. We always give notice to occupants, owners, before we publicly discuss that we might consider this as a site. But because this came up, I'm saying we aren't officially considering this, but we would like to have your reaction. Would it be good to have the school on further east in Maywood and further north, and where there was some empty land and non-Maywood land that would be affected? So we did look at reconfiguring it, and we have pulled this line back from the gas separation facility, so we're outside of the zone of risk. We have learned that the city of Vernon is about to go into construction on a new fire station, and it's a fire station that's going to serve not just the Vernon use, but we understand that it's also going to serve as an important ingredient in the county emergency preparedness network, and they're well advanced in that planning. So we assume that that will go ahead. So we have configured this site to exclude the site of the new fire station, and to be outside of this zone. And so we wind up with a bit over 9 acres, 9.4 acres, and that would involve the displacement of 24 single-family homes, 24, and 34 apartments, primarily duplexes and triplexes on that site. So of these, this is the lowest displacement. Let me say a couple of other things about this site. We do have a rail line that comes down here. It's an active rail line that serves businesses that are off here to the east. That rail line will continue to exist. We will have to assess the risks associated with being adjacent to that rail line. We for sure will have to have a very large wall at the very least, and when I say large, I'm talking about very thick and very tall, so that we protect this site from any risks associated with that rail that goes down to the north. We need to assess any emissions associated with this. Because we had looked at this previously, we had done a chunk of the health risk assessment associated with this site. We know we don't have a lot of the risk that we have with 25 and 26, therefore, even though it's right next to Vernon, in fact, partially in Vernon. So, we're putting this out for comment and consideration in response to the working session we have, and would love to have your comments. We're now going to open up the microphone, but first, because, as I said, it is nigh on to impossible to site this school without displacing residential or businesses, some existing uses. There's a lot of concern about, well, what happens? Am I just going to get kicked out in the street, or what does the district do? So I want to ask my colleague Ed Van Ginkel to come up and give an overview of relocation benefits, and then we will open up the microphone to public comment. Again, thank you very much for your patience and attention.